I think there will be this insurance policy that a lot of individuals and businesses will be taking out. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these emerging market central banks start accumulating Bitcoin and other currencies. So because if they know their currencies are going down and that they will be under attack as reserves go down, maybe they'll have a balance with Bitcoin and other crypto assets.
Welcome.
The ESG movement and this notion, which was exacerbated by Elon Musk, that there are some real environmental problems here with Bitcoin, with the mining of Bitcoin. And so I think that a lot of institutional buying went on pause, shall I say. And I think there were a lot of expectations that there would be follow through by institutions. We wrote a paper it was September or October, saying that we did believe this new asset class was finally getting the respect that it needs from institutions. There have been some leaders out there, certainly, but Fidelity and Mass Mutual, and then on the balance sheet, you've seen Square and Tesla and MicroStrategy, of course. And all of these, we thought, were teeing up the institutional world for some real participation in this space. We think some of that has gone on pause. But we think half of the solution is understanding the problem. And I think that this auditing that miners, certainly in North America, are willing to do around how much of their electricity usage is generated by renewables is going to bring that topic into stark relief and will encourage, we believe, an acceleration in the adoption of renewables beyond which otherwise would have taken the place. I don't know if you have seen the paper that ARC and Square collaborated on around this notion that when you're dealing with intermittent energy sources like solar or wind, it would be very nice and remunerative for the ecosystems out there to include Bitcoin mining. So when you filled up the storage, it can spill over into mining and probably will enable then an overbuilding of a solar because there is now more of a profit motive associated with it. I'll just say one more thing on that. I was surprised to see this already in motion. A company called Talon Energy last Friday, merchant power producer, announced that it's raising 800 or would like to raise 800 million in the equity market, 300 million of which would go to just this ecosystem, including Bitcoin mining into its ecosystem so that it could encourage the proliferation of solar and wind faster than otherwise would be the case. So again, half of the solution is understanding the problem.
Well, I think maybe this gets at a follow-up question, which is how much you think the key inflection point here is going from the idea that Bitcoin can incentivize green energy, that it's sort of these sort of vaguely stated narrative arguments that we have in places like Twitter, to actually having miners have to put their money where their mouth is. I mean, is this just actually ESG risk now being priced in, where the cost of switching to these other energy sources is going to be dramatically less than whatever sort of fights we have to have, either from a regulatory perspective or just from a pure perception perspective?
Okay, if I understand the question correctly, you're asking me, is this just ESG driven, or is this going to be a real change in behavior? It's not going to was this sort of almost always coming in terms of the, we fought the narrative battle around Bitcoin energy for a number of cycles, and now it's kind of, you're actually seeing companies make these shifts in a much bigger way and try to create the incentives to make it make sense. I think so. I think the market's demanding it. And to be honest, we had been watching how much of the electricity was already being produced by renewables. A lot more, as we learned, in China. Somewhere between 40 and 60%, I think, is the percentage. Partly because miners would shift to different areas, hydropower and other maybe wind power when it seemed productive to do so. So we thought the argument was somewhat overblown, especially when you think about it. Any progress is going to use more energy, right? Are we saying Bitcoin is progress, but it can't use more energy, and it happens to be already more renewable, especially in some of the biggest countries for mining, than I think most people appreciated. So the utility value here of Bitcoin and other cryptos is such that it is progress. We think it's, the first global monetary system in the world, rules-based. There's huge utility to that. Now, maybe we in the developed world do not appreciate this as much as those in the developing world, where there are more corrupt regimes and where they lose their purchasing power regularly, and they can lose their wealth regularly as well from confiscation. Huge utility value here. And so real progress in terms of helping those who are living in those very difficult areas. So how much do we pay for this? Well, if you listen to the UN and look at the Sustainable Development Goals, helping individuals maintain their wealth and their purchasing power is a huge advance. It could be for 3-4 billion people on the planet who would not have this opportunity. So we're talking about energy usage in isolation. What is the utility? What is the progress here we're talking about? It could be enormous. And I think the market will come around to understanding that.
I think this gets at a fundamental point that I've heard others, I think Joe Weisenthal from Bloomberg, make, that the energy conversation has too often come down to the simple binary of whether you think Bitcoin's energy usage, whether you think Bitcoin is valuable. And everything else is totally incidental to that. And so to some extent, what you're saying is we need to also, even as we're exploring this sort of new green energy approaches, get back to